What is going to be your legacy?
Welcome to Legacy, the family business podcast with me, your host, Paul Andrews, and my co-host here, Sam Greaves. Today, we're joined by Adam Walsh, who is the CEO of the John Good Group here in Hull, in Yorkshire. Adam, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the John Good Group?
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me, guys. John Good is an amazing organisation. 6 generations now. So the business is currently in the majority shareholder, Tim Good, and we've got various cousins and other bits and pieces besides making up the rest of the shareholding, and then our foundation, which is a 10% shareholder. So still very closely knitted around that family line. The business is 191 years old this year, so it's been going an awful long time. Today, we've got businesses that operate in corporate travel. We've got warehousing. We've got a logistics business with 18 HGVs. We've got 3 shipping businesses now. So we've got some shipping businesses on the Humber, looking after bulk cargoes and also offshore renewables now after a recent acquisition. We've got a business down in Cardiff that looks after predominantly scrap and shipping as well. We've got a little bit of property dotted around the country. And we've got our foundation, the Matthew Good Foundation. Yeah. So very diverse. Means there's always something going brilliantly. It means there's always something going terribly. But we're getting used to that now, and the business is on the right path to growth. We sold our largest business in 2021. It was a massive transitional period for the business. So nearly 80% of the turnover went, 2/3 of the headcount went with that disposal. And really, since the end of 21 and my appointment at the start of 2022, we've been in a big rebuild phase, but it feels like we're at the end of the beginning now in terms of that rebuild, and we've got all the businesses where we want them to be, moving in the direction we want them to be, potentially not at the right pace or at the pace we want them to be, but that's maybe more about my impatience rather than the skill sets of the management teams that run those businesses. And everything's good. We've got hold of the business and it's moving in the right direction.
You mentioned your appointment, so you're not a family member. So you can explain a little bit more about what your role is exactly?
Yeah, so the Good family generally don't get involved in the day-to-day operations at all of the company. And that's been the way since probably 10, 15 years now. So if I give you the bit of the company history, John Good was the 5th generation family shareholder. And John had 2 sons, Tim and Matthew. And Matthew was the older son and very much lined up to take over the chief exec chairman type roles in the future. He was in the business, he was getting the grounding in the business, and he was very much the focus in terms of taking on that sort of mantle of taking on the family business moving forwards. Tim, on the other hand, philanthropist, entrepreneur in his own right, loves a bit of an adventure every now and again, was no real interest in the day-to-day at all of the business, so was very much outside of it. It was very much about Matthew. Matthew, like a lot of people in the business and in the family, very passionate about raising money and social impact. And Matthew was signed up to an event, the Humber Half Marathon, and got into some difficulties on the course. Matthew ultimately passed away because of those difficulties. And that was a real transition moment, clearly for the family, incredibly sad tragedy, and really left the future plans for the organisation in ruins. And at that time, the family weren't in that position to really bring anybody else into the family. Tim wasn't ready to take on that, and I'm not even sure Tim wanted to really do that. That wasn't Tim. So we've really had professional leadership in the group since that point, and that was a turning point, and definitely not planned, a complete tragedy, but that was that pivot point where the family decided to go with a professional leadership, family owned, professionally ran. And at that point, they appointed the first ever group CEO, who then went on to run the business really for the last 10 years until that disposal I mentioned. And then I've come in. So my role as chief exec, I'm completely responsible for the day-to-day operations within the organisation and making sure that we deliver on our strategic objectives. I work for the chairman of the board, as a chap called Stuart Oates. Stuart is an amazing boss, actually, in that he is very clear on the direction that he wants to see, and we're very, very aligned around that direction. but he then gives me incredibly wide boundaries to just go on and operate. And his role is just making sure that I don't stray too far from those boundaries, and I occasionally do step over and get the odd slapped wrist for doing that. But he gives me a load of space to just get on and operate. So actually, on a day-to-day basis, it feels like my company, and I love that. It gives me all the energy and the purpose to get out of bed in the morning and go and do what I want to do. And broadly, that's what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I have always 90% of my career been in family businesses.
Yeah.
And I accepted a long time ago that the family silver's the family's. Yeah, and I think that's always one of the challenges when you bring in a professional. Professionals, especially if they're coming in from PLCs, private equity, they're used to having stakes. They're used to feeling like they share in that value. You don't quite get that set of circumstances in family businesses that often. I'm very, very comfortable with that. My job is to look after the assets and the value of the families and do the best possible job with those assets.
Well, you get to play with their train set, don't you? It's their train set. You recognise that. They understand it's theirs and they've given it to you to manage.
Yep.
And so you get the opportunity to manage their train set and do what you do really well. What were the thought process when you say you've got a background, you've worked with family businesses for a long time? Was there ever any question, it's a family business, I'm not sure it's for me? Was the knit just there, the alignment of values and purpose and what they're trying to do, it fitted really well with what you're looking for?
Yeah, so I've worked effectively for 3 big family businesses, if you include the goods. So Bayford, which is a 3rd generation family business that is based out of Leeds in West Yorkshire, run by Jonathan Turner. I've worked for Gerald Ronson, or Sir Gerald Ronson now, another amazing family business in London across petrol retailing and property and all sorts of different bits and pieces. Actually, I tell a lie, 4 family businesses because I've worked for the Rixes as well. So I've worked across a number of different family businesses, well-recognised family businesses, and latterly John Good, and seen things done very differently in different businesses. I get a lot of energy from 2 things. I like to have big challenges, especially when it comes to growth. So I am good. I was about to say brilliant, but that's a bit headed. I am good at taking things from 20% right to 80%. That's the bit I like doing, and I think I'm quite good at it. The last 20% I'm terrible at. Marginal gains is boring. I'm not good at it. It's not what I do. So anything that's a growth opportunity or a rebuild or a change is exciting to me. And that was very much present in John Good, given the context of the disposal, and we're trying to build this new business and set a new direction. And that was also the time that Tim was coming in as the major shareholder. So that's definitely a big driver for me. And the second bit, which I've had some exposure to in my career, but I think as I've maybe got a bit older, matured a bit, the concept that businesses can be a genuine force for good in whichever area that they feel passionate about. So at John Good, it's the environment and it's the local communities in which we operate. But wherever that is, the idea that business can be a force for good is really, really exciting to me.
Yeah.
And John Good embodies that. And for me, who's really bothered about being known to be able to grow businesses and drive profits, that's important to me, that performance piece. But knowing that every extra pound or penny that you generate can go to social good, I mean, it literally is perfect as far as I'm concerned, because I know I can go and drive these businesses, and I know working with the leadership team, we can go and make a difference in the performance of the businesses. Yeah. But the idea being that those pounds and pennies that produce out of that growing the margins, growing the profitability, making those clever investments, end up producing more profit, and all of that profit goes back into the foundation or allows me to grow the businesses further, and it isn't disappearing necessarily into shareholder pockets in a different way. It's incredibly rewarding as a chief exec to be in that situation, because you feel like you win twice.
And it's aligned, isn't it? The family values are aligned to the business. The business has got a clear purpose. You know where you're going. You've got drivers that drive you in terms of your performance and your targets with your teams, and your teams get it too. So that whole perfect alignment almost creates the perfect storm to make a difference.
Alignment, I think, is bang on. Your point around alignment. I have an interesting take on values, and it might be a little bit more controversial in the family business community. There's a ranting coming now. I don't know if family values are the right values for a business.
Oh, big call.
Big call. Okay. So I respect and understand why a family has values. I see it in all the families I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's potentially asking a little bit too much for every employee to take on the full range of values of a family. Okay. Because there is a difference, a strong difference, in my opinion, between family, which is you stuck together for a long time, you've come together through the way everything works, you rub along against each other because you're going to have to. There can be fallouts, but generally speaking, you're going to run along this together. I understand that dynamic, and some of that dynamic needs to be in the business. But think about what a business is for. A business is about achieving some objectives, an ambition, a purpose, potentially. And the team that is required to do that is team values. Okay, it's not necessarily the same as family values, because team values are about performance, it's about executing plans, it's about skill sets, capability, capacity, all those different things. And ultimately, in a team, the different pieces are interchangeable. So I like to think that I do a good job, but at some point I won't be in John Good, and there'll be a different person sat in this chair probably talking to you guys about what they're doing with John Good and how they're taking it on the next line. That will happen. And if you're going to build a team, you've got to build the team with team values, and it's about winning, and it's about drive, and it's about energy, and all of those are the things that allow you to accomplish your goals. My job is somewhere in the middle of those two things. My job is taking the family values, 100% at all time respecting the family values, and distilling where it makes sense into the team so that the family feels some of their values reflected that way. But my job is also to guard the business against only having family values, because family values will not necessarily always deliver the results that you need when you're running a business. And that's, I think, where sometimes a professional rather than a family member that leads an organization has to play this slightly hybrid role. But I'll try and protect the business from family values, but I respect them, but I've also got to protect the business.
But then I think you mentioned right at the end, which is the big point, is results. So if the goals are results driven, and if the target for the business are results, then you're right. You can't sit there. What family sits there and says, right, today's Sunday lunch, we're all going to sit down, and the target for the family, you don't have that, right? And I completely get that. But if family business has a culture first priority, and we're going to treat everyone with respect, and the value of people feel comfortable to be themselves, which is what, with my children, that's all I ever want to do with them, is to create this environment where they can just be the best version of themselves. I'm not going to sit my kids down and say, this is what I want from A level, this is what I want for university. And I find, it is, and I know you said it's a rant, but it is something that you see on LinkedIn a lot. Don't call your staff family members, because actually, if there's gross misconduct, they're out. And I was like, well, I kind of get that, but we can take some of it and say, right, well, if we treat each other with respect and we allow people to be the best version of themselves, and if our goal is to have a business where the culture is the priority, everyone's engaged, then actually you can have a little bit more of a family value basis.
And that is a great example of my bit about distilling some of the family values into the organization itself. So we adopted the 3 Ps, the triple bottom line, back in 2022. So people and planet. And a lot of the way that we talk about people and planet is driven by our stakeholders' values. And so a lot of the time we're trying to deliver on what they would like to see. The bit where I will challenge some of that is, and you've picked an example, a great example actually there, is families will stick together for good work. But families will stick together through thick and thin, right? I've mentioned that already. That's not right for a business. And also I would always argue that if a family wants to do more social good, look after, develop the culture and all those things, that's born out of having a sustainable, successful business, which allows you to invest in those things, because you can do all of those things and have a business that fails.
But I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? It's a successful business first. You distill the family values into something that makes sense commercially. And then you talk about purpose and the purpose that the good family want to make in the community and the planet. That's what you're doing through the foundation.
Yeah.
So you're not just spraying family values on the wall, which lots of organisations put integrity, honesty on a wall and expect everyone to live by the word that's not embedded. You're taking those values and embedding them into the ethos, the culture of John Good Group, and making them real and honest, and they perform. And that's what's created the culture, which enables you to perform and make the difference at the same time.
And carry on amplifying that difference.
Which is really
more
important.
Profit means more social impact, means I can invest more, I can buy other businesses, which makes us more sustainable. That means we're going to be more successful. That means we can plough more into our foundation or through other bits and pieces. You make an interesting point, though, about values. I am a complete anti talking about core values generally publicly, completely against it, because core values for me are very much an internal thing. It's about behaviours. It's about the way we treat each other within our organisation. I believe, and I will be slated for this, but I believe the second they go on the website and say these are our core values, it becomes a marketing tool. And I'm not convinced that what a customer wants to see in the values of the company are the same as the values you expect in your employees. I'm just not convinced about that.
Do you not think that that's just very much that the business environment that we have, you've got family businesses, you've got big corporations. Big
Some
corporations.
family businesses are big corporations too.
Correct, yeah. And I know you're the expert, but for me, I look at it as a family business going into it, and I asked you the question on the podcast that we did, which was what differentiates the big corporations and the family businesses? And you turned around and said trust. And as a family business, I think you've built that relationship for people, but the big corporations don't have that necessarily. So they've got to post their values on in order to try and share their values and get the engagement and build the trust that they want. And then we look at the big corporations and go, oh, look, they're really successful. And then there's this loop, this information loop going around and copying what they're doing for the purpose of it.
And they're doing it I think you're right, because they necessarily lack those internal behaviours in their teams. Yeah. But if you think about why you put it on your website, you put it on your website because you're trying to convince a customer that this is what you do. But to be blunt, I expect things from my team when we're performing that aren't necessarily something you'd want online. You want your team to optimize margins. You want your team to cut costs. You want your team to manage suppliers right. Okay, they're the things that you expect from your people, but you're not going to ever see those on the core values. So it just undermines the value of having these things. So that's why I'm always like, if it's core values, it's got to be internal. It's got to be about you and your team. It's got to be about what you expect your people to do. And the second it hits a website, it might as well just be marketing, but then remove this idea that it's core values and actually speak to your customer, who's the people you want to read your website, and communicate to them in what they want to hear, which is, I will value you. I know who you are. Do you know what I mean? I might not always be the best price, but I'll give you, the best price we can give you. We'll always deliver service. You'll always get more value than the cost. That's the customer values.
Yeah. Well, that's living the values, isn't it? That's the authenticity of who you are.
100%, but that's what a customer needs to hear. That's very different to what those internal values are.
Well, actions speak louder than words, right? So you don't need to be telling them. If you're showing them, then you're more likely to maintain that relationship.
100%.
I just want to reel back, going back into, if you think of our millions of listeners, and I think one of the things that I was most interested about when you stood up and presented at the Family Business Conference was this kind of bridge between family and the business. And I look back and I was really interested because at some point I was sitting there going, I've got to get out of the day-to-day. I need to get more into the strategy. I need to be overriding seeing. And I was really interested to go, oh, well, maybe as a fourth gen family business that there is an opportunity for someone who is not a family member to come in, take over the day-to-day. What I'd love to hear from you are kind of some of the trials and tribulations of how that process goes, how it works, what's really good, what's being made to work on, what are the potential pitfalls that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah, so it's a massive topic for our community more generally, and we hear it just about every conference, every time we go, to one of the seminars. They're talking always about how do we bring in professional talent to the organisations. I think the first thing you've got to do as a family is be really, really clear about the boundaries and the expectations of this person. So where your red lines are, where you want to be involved, the things you are going to relinquish, okay? And if you want to hire, especially senior talent, you are going to have to relinquish a lot because they expect to have that authority and the responsibility to get on and do it in their own way. That, for me, is the stage that I think I've seen a lot of companies get slightly wrong because they go, right, we'll hire a professional, and they'll rush through a recruitment process, and then they've got somebody in situ, and every line is fuzzy and blurred, and you quickly undermine the new leadership that you've got in. You let the people that are within the business bypass those people and come and talk to the family like they have been for the last 20 years. Undermines the leadership, they leave because they'll just go and find another opportunity somewhere else. So David talks about this a lot, doesn't he? The preparation and getting it all right really early, for me, is one of the things that I see companies and organizations get wrong an awful lot. The second area for me is then about ongoing. It's about defining how people are rewarded. It's all of those other things that people have got to get right, because ultimately we're all interchangeable parts. That is one of the things that we have as professionals. You will come in here, you'll do a job, you'll hopefully deliver, but at some point someone else will either want that skill set, or you'll decide that your challenge is done and you will go and find the next challenge to give you some of that energy and the purpose. So making sure that the family recognise that what the marketplace looks like and what makes the individual tick, and make sure those things are relatively well aligned, is really, really important. And even that in itself sometimes can be a bit of a moment, I think, for family businesses where they go, Jesus Christ, we don't take that much out of the business. How can we justify giving it to this person? But what you're paying for is skill sets, experience, and all those other bits and pieces. So I think that's another area where they've really got to give some time and thought. And I suppose that the last one is just making sure that ongoing, that there's a relationship that's in place and that relationship works, and that it's not going off in too many directions, and that there's real clear boundaries, communication, expectations that are set, because that keeps everybody in line and in check as you move forward. So I think they're probably the sort of two or three that come to mind straight off the top of my head. But I think it's a really tricky thing. I suppose the only other thing that comes to mind is, and again, I think this is where family businesses have to just think about this. I think it's something that will always happen as people go through the experience of bringing on a professional, is just because we're a professional doesn't mean we're a magician. I'm good at what I do. My track record's good. That doesn't necessarily mean that I can do it everywhere. It doesn't necessarily mean I can perform in every context, in every scenario. So I think the other sort of myth that needs to be dispelled a little bit is when you bring in a senior person, they're just going to have every answer to every question and it's all going to be roses from the get-go. The chances are it's not. The chances are that people are going to have to learn. They're going to have very different views on people because they will think about people in different ways than maybe the family have. That might create some difficult scenarios, but ultimately we don't have every answer to every question. We should have, if we get senior roles, a good body of experience, and we should have track record that gets you through the door. But we are not magicians, and that there will be no rabbits pulled out of hats. It'll be the same old grind, hard work, some good choices, and stuff takes time.
But that goes back to the family values, doesn't it? So you strip that right back to the beginning. You want someone to come and focus on the strategic direction and take responsibility. Honest, open, authentic conversations by the family members making those decisions. They need to appoint the right person, but you said they need to appoint the right person and then let them do the job within boundaries and frameworks, so that you're not bringing someone in and tying their hands behind their back and not letting them in and saying they're failing. Because ultimately, it's a family business owner. You want the business to succeed, so you want that person to have the best chance of success. But that's where some of the boundaries don't work, and that's where some of the family businesses fail, is they don't appoint the person and then let them do the job and manage it going forward. It becomes muddled and grey.
Yep.
And that's where I think the challenges are.
And 100%, if you hire somebody with a wide brief and you supposedly empower them to get on and do that job, and then you don't, it's so evident. It's so clear.
Yeah.
And in that early year, 18 months, landing in a new organisation, your radar is up big time for that stuff. Are you delivering what you told me you were going to deliver when we went through the hiring process?
Yeah.
And so you're really looking out for, are they really doing what they said they were going to do? And you will get professionals doing that because they've landed in other roles, they've gone through other organisations, they're used to seeing, is this what this really is?
Yeah.
And family members who have maybe not worked in other businesses might not appreciate that about how you are in other roles. And on that topic, though, fair play to the goods, and this is where Tim and Stuart especially, I think, get a lot of credit from me. They were so accurate with how they described what I was walking into and what space I would have to play. And I can think of 2 or 3 times in the whole 2.5 years where there's been a little bit of friction around some of those boundaries, but they were bang on with how they described it.
Yeah.
And that means when I walked in, the expectation was set perfectly. And then as a result, you walk into it and go, this is what I expected.
Yeah. And some friction's good. It's good for business to have challenge and people that can push back and challenge questions, challenge the norm, because change happens and sometimes friction doesn't have to be conflict, as long as it's managed and governed in the right way, can push you forward and grow. But the friction could be a good point, not necessarily a bad thing. And people talk about it as being negative all the time. And friction can actually help positive change.
You can't change anything without a bit of friction. You can't, you have to break some eggs. There's all those, can roll out any old phrase around this topic. But I think that works 2 ways as well in when you bring in a leader from outside of the family into a new business. So you've got the relationship upwards with the family and the way that they govern and how they interact with the senior stakeholders in the business. You've then got effectively your peer group, so the other leadership and how they're used to dealing with the family, and that can change the dynamic quite quickly. They're used to picking the phone up to the guy that owns it, and now they've got to talk to you, and you'll make a decision if you pick the phone up to. So there's the other big area of change, and we've gone through this at John Good, is we were trying to drive more of a performance culture in because we wanted to do the growth to deliver on the social impact that we've talked about. So. That meant we had to shake some of the businesses into life a little bit because in the old group, pre-me, we had the one big business and then lots of smaller businesses. And those smaller businesses had all done very well in their own rights, but they'd been in a more of a maintain, just make sure the wheels don't fall off, produce the profitability that it used to. But there was no big aspiration to do anything. There was no growth plans. There's no, right, let's go on a mission. Let's invest our money. Let's do these things. So when I landed, we had 4 MDs that were reporting to me at that time who were used to running their businesses and being, I would say, relatively comfortable. They were all doing fine in their own rights. There was nothing nothing on fire at all. But here came along me with a load of ambition, wanting to change the world. And I think there in itself lies within quite an interesting challenge within family businesses, because a lot of these people were long serving. They'd worked for the goods for forever. I think my shortest serving MD had done 8 or 9 years, and my longest serving was probably at 30. They'd worked for the goods forever. So, and then here comes me, full of energy, 1,000 ideas, didn't quite know the industries because I came out of a commodities background, and now I'm doing a load of industries that I've never done before, with 1,000 ideas and things I wanted to do. And straight away, the guys are like, well, what does this guy know? So there was a period of bedding in there that took far longer than was comfortable for me. I like working at more pace than the team. So we had to find a way to meet in the middle around those things. I had to do a lot of work to gain trust, would be a word I'd like to use, but they probably didn't trust me, but at least respect that I had the ability to understand what they were talking about and start to challenge them in the way that needed challenging. What you find in a lot of businesses is new chief exec lands and they effectively clear out the leadership team. That's what happens a lot. And I think family business owners, shareholders, I think they've got a bit of a fear around that. They fear that all these people that have worked for a long time, new CEO lands, he doesn't like any of them, gets rid of him. I was very, very clear in my own mind that I wanted to give all of the managing directors a real chance to understand me, to understand what we're trying to do, and give them the time and the space to meet me somewhere in the middle on that. And we did that, and all of the managing directors are still there. They're all now working on growth plans. They wouldn't have done that 2.5 years ago, but that just takes time. And that's had to be an awful lot of self-control on my part. because I don't like working slowly, and it was too slow. But they've met me in the middle, and now we've got that really nice rhythm around the business, and the business is moving at different paces in different places, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Do you think family businesses have a same strength and weakness? And I look at myself and I go, one of my biggest strengths is my belief and investment in people. One of my biggest weaknesses is my patience and investment in people, that I probably give, some of the good ones, I give them the time and they step up finally, and it's all achieved and we meet in the middle and the goals are hit. Or I give the bad ones way too long, invest too much money and waste too much time. From your kind of experience working with the 4 family businesses, do you see that regularly? Do you think that's a kind of regular pattern with family businesses?
I think it's something that you see in an awful lot of businesses, and it doesn't matter whether it's family or not. I think it's a common problem. The benefit of family businesses, especially at the smaller end, like John Good, you know everybody. You know their names, you know their families, there's all that sort of stuff. I see it very similar to you, actually, and I accept the cost of what the choices we make. I would prefer to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and the chance to progress their career, to take on the new opportunity and whatever, and accept that I will make some calls wrong and fail, than not give anybody the chance at all. So I think it's the best way to approach people generally. The only area where I sometimes see family businesses is drawing the line quicker than they potentially do. So this person's not going to make it, and calling it a day. I sometimes see family businesses letting that go on too long. And what that does overall in terms of the performance of the business is your business gets increasingly average in its performance, because your ability to do things is the sum of is the average of all the people in it, right? Yep. So it's about really concentrating on the people that are firing. So you invest into them, keep ploughing in, but just be a little bit quicker with calling it a day with people. Yeah. And it's never about people being bad. I used to run sales teams, so my background was sales marketing manager. And very, very often there was very capable salespeople who weren't performing in our business. And it wasn't that they were bad at sales. They just weren't great at selling in our industry. They had a slightly different sales set. Yeah. And that was typically my message to most of the people I let go. You're not a bad salesperson. You just haven't got the right skill sets for our industry. Carry on going. And that is often the case. It's just you can't cut it how we need it done. Doesn't mean you can't cut it somewhere else.
But also family businesses change over time, and you've been around for over 190 years as an organisation, sold a big part of the business a couple of years ago. So your business model has changed. And for example, a finance director running a 10 million turnover business, there'll be a very different skill set for a finance director that's running a 100 million turnover business. So sometimes longevity of staff, and yes, family businesses employ people for a long period of time, and there's loyalty and trust and all that built up. But sometimes the business just needs change.
Yep.
And I think you're right. Some of those decisions are just put off because of relationships and the nice family business environment. But in the end, the business suffers and may not perform as well as it could do. You talked at the start of the conversation about purpose, and I've never come across a family business with as much dedicated kind of commitment to their underlying core purpose, which comes from being a successful family business, to be able to put money into the foundation and do what you do. Where do you think that drives come from, and how do you make sure that perpetuates? And what's the long-term view for the business in terms of as it evolves further now that you're on board?
The purpose starts with Tim Good. He gives us the freedom to operate, but he is incredibly clear on 2 or 3 key topics. So those big themes come from Tim. After that, it's... I like taking on other people's challenges. Yeah, that's one of the things that gets me out of bed. So the delivering for Tim his ambitions and seeing Tim become, I believe, increasingly proud of the organisation he's got because we're delivering to his purpose is amazing to see. And he stood up our AGM just a couple of months ago, and typically he talks for a couple of minutes, and he stood up this time and went, all I can say is I've never been as proud, and sat back down. And for me, I'll take that forever. Yeah, that was definitely ace. A great moment. And so I think that starts with Tim. The probably unique opportunity that John's Goods had because of the scenario that we've talked about, the disposal and almost a blank canvas when I came in, is that I've been quite fortunate that at the group level especially, we've had to hire everybody. So at the time where I landed, I was employee number 3 at group after the disposal. Today we're probably nearer 20, 25 at the group level, so a massive investment. But we've been able to pick people that have common or alignment, I suppose is the right way to say it, around wanting to deliver that purpose. So that's the bit where we've been very lucky, because instead of having to do a change management piece at the group level, we've recruited to people that want to do pro bono work, want to get involved in charity, doing volunteering days, raising money, going cycling, whatever it is. We've made that a very deliberate part of our recruitment to make sure that some of those things are seen in all of the people. That doesn't mean I want carbon copies of everybody. That's not healthy. You need that challenge around the top team, and we've got some very strong opinions around that top team. It's great for me, keeps me in check. But that's allowed us to do that. And then once you've got that, and you've got a majority of people that think like that, actually then delivering on a daily basis just becomes easier and easier and easier, because you're not having to fight against it. Have we got it into all of our operations in a way that I'd really like? Not yet. Some of our operations are ahead of others, but all of them are progressing, and I'll take that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if we're progressing on the purpose side, and we've got our strategic plans being delivered, and the profitability is in the place we need it to be, I have to say I'm happy. It isn't perfect, but nothing ever is. But that's all come from Tim to start with, leadership team that's well aligned around that, and then recruiting around that purpose and making sure that all of the characters are pulling in the same direction.
You started off telling us about your history working with family businesses. Why do you, and what do you love about family businesses, and what makes them so special that you feel that it's just always going to drive you to want to work within a family business?
There's a macro answer, and then there's some personal details. The big bit for me is generational family businesses are categorically the only business model that is going to get businesses through all of the change that we're going to see over the next 20 to 50 years, environmentally, socially, politically, all of those other things. Family businesses and the generational outlook of family businesses are categorically the only answer to the majority of the problems we face. And I'll argue that with anybody at any point. Okay. Big businesses think monthly, quarterly, all the other bits and pieces. Family businesses are like, I am setting this up for my children and their children. Give me another business model that thinks like that. There just isn't one, right? So I am a massive advocate for the industry as a whole, or our sector as a whole, because I just believe it provides all the answers. We're not perfect. We don't drive massive profits and returns and all those other things. And there is challenges within family business dynamics, but generally speaking, it's the right model. On a personal level, I believe, and I know there's family businesses of different sizes, but my experience has predominantly been in smaller family businesses where there is far more visibility with the senior people. And I believe in family businesses of anywhere between 10 people up to 250 people. If you have got something about you, a talent, something where you can show that you can make a difference, your career can accelerate at a pace that I don't believe you see in other organizations, because people know who you are, they know what you do, you can show track record really quickly. And typically, family businesses are looking for that person to give the next problem to. And so over time, in family businesses, you get far more opportunity to do different things. You get a varied skill set. You understand some of the challenges. You're dealing with high net worth individuals who have a different outlook on life because they're the owners potentially. You just get exposed to all of this in a very, very different way. And I think if I'd have found myself, and it was possible at the time, but if I'd have found myself in a bigger business or a private equity-backed business, I don't think I'd have got the opportunity or the visibility to really demonstrate my skill set. And I would always encourage anybody to have a go at working in a family business, because if you've got something about yourself and you back yourself, I believe you will find a way to the top far quicker than potentially working through the ranks in other places where sometimes it's just politics and it's completely out of your hand because the hiring manager doesn't like your manager, which means you're not liked, and that's it. Whereas I look at my business now and there's 2 or 3 people dotted around my business that I go, yeah, you need to prove yourself for a year or 2, but keep doing it. Keep your nose relatively clean. Yeah. I hope you get a few knockbacks to see how, you react and how you bounce back. But you keep going the right direction, you're going to be an absolute superstar. You're ones for the future. And you just don't get that in bigger businesses. Or the ability to then do it.
Yeah.
So I love the way you talk about my business, because I know you started off by saying it wasn't your train set, it's the family have the ownership, but actually you've been empowered to do what you do, and you do treat it like it's your business, and you use the word my business, which is really, really nice to hear with someone that's the non-family CEO running a family business, because it is personal, and you take it really personally. John Good Group, multi-generational, long history, long story. You've captured some of the essence of that story in the last couple of years, and the rebrand and the way you've demonstrated and tell your story. Talk around a little bit about that narrative and how you've built that into the John Good of the 21st century, and how you've used that in terms of who you are as a business today.
We've got an amazing heritage, 191 years, and the stories that go with some of that are just off the charts, exciting and interesting. So we've got to do a really important job for the family especially, but also for the organisation, in making sure that we capture and promote our heritage, because it's where we've come from.
Mm-hmm.
But the other challenge is it cannot be an anchor. That wasn't a maritime pun, so apologies for that instantly. But it cannot be an anchor on where the business is going. And I think if the heritage becomes too heavy, you get bogged down in it, and you feel a weight that you shouldn't feel when you're trying to move a business forward. It's a really tricky tightrope to walk, because at no point should you ever create the impression that you're disrespecting that heritage with the family. But at the same time, you've also got to say, guys, we've got to think about the next 200 years. And it's not like we've got a 200-year plan. We've got a 3-year plan. But that 3-year plan's got to be a step towards the 5 years and the 10 years. And, we're coming up to our 200th birthday. I'm very focused on that 200th anniversary, because I want to make sure at that point in time, the business is thriving. We've got really sustainable profitability, that we've delivered on that people and planet objectives. And that means we're going to have to change the way the business runs. Because if you look at our business today, all great businesses, but they tend to be smaller businesses in quite big industries, because a lot of them have gone through consolidation. That's going to create market dynamic challenges to the business if we don't think about that in the future, and also spot where to invest in growing marketplaces so that the business carries on doing what it does. That's the interesting challenge. And so it's about respecting the heritage, but it's about being very clear on which direction we need to go in. And that goes down to good comms with the family, because you've got to show that you're respecting it, but you've also got to make sure that they respect and hear the message that you're giving, that you can't just stay frozen in this period because it's comfortable and it's got a rose glow around it. I mean, even look, you've heard the John Good story, and the way we tell it, okay, there's definitely some ups and downs and a roller coaster, but even the ups will be rose tinted. That won't be quite how it happened, or that's not how the story quite happened. All the time, those generations before will have been facing major strategic challenges and major problems. And to think that they didn't pivot and diversify and do those things is incorrect. They definitely did.
Yeah.
And we should take that and we should apply that to where we're at today to move the business forward, whilst trying to respect as well as we can the heritage.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, I think that leads us on to my final question. Obviously, it's the Legacy podcast. What is the John Good Group legacy? What will it be?
It's funny you asked that question. I think about legacy. I think about it in the way that there will be a time where I disappear for whatever reason out of the business. And I want to make sure that the business that I leave has absolutely rock solid profitability that is truly sustainable and diversified. And I want to be able to evidence that we've done that, and with those proceeds, we have made a huge difference to the charity through the Matthew Good Foundation, to the charities that they work with, and we've truly addressed our environmental initiatives. And if I can leave a real body of work that delivers that, I'll have done a good job at John Good. And to extend that, if John Good can do that, and we can be an example for businesses in our community, for the wider family business cohort, regionally, nationally, whatever, and demonstrate that actually if you just put your mind to it and you put your money where your mouth is occasionally, you can genuinely make a difference. If I can deliver across those two things, that will be truly legacy for the period that I've had the privilege of running the business.
Yeah. That's amazing. Adam, part of Sam and I, thank you so much for joining us on the Legacy Podcast today. Join us for future Legacy podcasts and more family business insights from great family business leaders like Adam in the weeks to come. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
What is going to be your legacy?